Chester Freilich thought he was cooperating with federal law enforcement. He thought he was clearing his name from identity theft charges. He sent nearly $200,000 in cash and gold to people he believed were government agents. And then the real police showed up at his door.
Hi, is it Chester?
Yes.
Hi, Chester. It's Officer Matthews with Concord Police Department.
Yes.
Chester is not a careless person. He's not someone who clicks on random links or gives out his credit card to strangers. Chester was convinced he was under federal investigation for wire fraud, for identity theft. The person on the phone listed every credit card he'd had in 40 years. They told him someone had rented an apartment in Texas in his name. They had proof. And they told him the only way to clear his name was to move his money to a secure government account. Immediately. Over the course of several weeks, Chester sent nearly $200,000 to people he believed were Federal Trade Commission agents. The money's gone. And now he owes more than $30,000 in taxes because he cashed out his retirement accounts to send to scammers. The IRS told him if he can't pay, they'll put a lien on his house. On this channel, we break down how scams like this work, how professional criminals impersonate law enforcement, how they access your personal data, how they weaponize your sense of right and wrong against you. If you want to understand this before it happens to someone you care about, stay with me.
And about an hour later, I get a call from this man called Jason Brown from the FTC. And he informs me that I'm under investigation for wire fraud. And he lists all the credit cards I've had in 40 years.
We don't know Chester Freilich's exact age. The news story doesn't specify, but we know he's lived in Concord, California for a long time. He has savings. He has retirement accounts, CDS, an IRA. He has a house. He's built a life. Chester is the kind of person who follows rules, who respects authority, who wants to do the right thing. That last detail is important, because the scammers didn't target him by promising money. They targeted him by accusing him of a crime. This is a different psychological hook than lottery scams or sweepstakes fraud. This isn't about greed. This is about fear, about shame, about the terror of being accused of something you didn't do. Chester received a call in early March 2024. The caller said they were from Xfinity, his internet provider. They told him someone had used his personal information to upload videos to a website. Illegal videos, they implied. And they were generating a report to the Federal Trade Commission. Chester didn't upload anything. He had no idea what they were talking about. But the caller knew his account details. They knew his personal information. They sounded legitimate. About an hour later, another call came. This time, someone claiming to be Jason Brown from the FTC. Agent Brown informed Chester he was under investigation for wire fraud.
And he informs me that I'm under investigation for wire fraud.
And then Agent Brown did something that made Chester's blood run cold.
And he lists all the credit cards I've had in 40 years.
He listed every credit card Chester had held over the last 40 years. Every single one. This wasn't a random call. This was targeted. This was someone with access to Chester's full financial history. Agent Brown told Chester that someone had stolen his identity, that they'd rented an apartment in Texas in his name, that fraudulent transactions had been made, and that Chester was the primary suspect.
Freilich says Agent Brown also told him someone rented an apartment in Texas in his name and that the FTC didn't believe he'd made those transactions.
But there was hope.
To help him, they would move all his money to a secure account.
If Chester cooperated, if he moved his money to a secure government account, they could protect his assets and clear his name. Chester believed them because they knew everything about him and because he was terrified. Agent Brown knew everything. He knew Chester's credit card history going back 40 years. He knew about accounts Chester had forgotten. He knew details that only someone with access to financial databases would know. This is not magic. This is stolen data. Criminal networks purchase information from data breaches. They buy access to leaked databases. They use social engineering to extract information from customer service representatives. When a scammer calls you and knows intimate details about your financial life, it's because your data was compromised somewhere. But here's what makes this scam particularly sophisticated. They didn't just know Chester's information. They used it to build a narrative that made sense. Someone rented an apartment in Texas in your name. Someone made fraudulent transactions. You're under investigation, but we can help you. The FTC, the real FTC, would never make a call like this. But Chester didn't know that. He was panicking. And when you're panicking, you don't think clearly.
I lost the AD $500, plus all my life savings.
Agent Brown told Chester they needed to move his money to a secure account, to protect it from the identity thieves, to preserve the evidence, to clear his name. Chester went to his bank. He withdrew large amounts of cash. He cashed out CDS. He liquidated his IRA. Then came the next part of the scam. The couriers.
And the scam continues. After a couple of days, they have me withdraw more money. And this goes on about 5 times.
Agent Brown told Chester that government couriers would come to his house to pick up the cash. They would supply a password that Chester would verify, then they'd transport the money to the secure account. Chester received what appeared to be official letters from the Department of the Treasury confirming the plan. The letters had government letterhead. They looked legitimate. So when the couriers showed up, sometimes multiple times over several weeks, Chester gave them boxes filled with cash and gold. The couriers provided the correct password. They took the boxes. They left. Concord police later determined these couriers were likely rideshare drivers. Uber or Lyft drivers who had been hired through the app to pick up a package from an address. They had no idea they were part of a scam.
It doesn't appear in most of the cases that the couriers are involved. They're somewhat unknowing participants.
They were given a password to confirm the pickup. They thought it was a legitimate delivery job. This is genius criminal architecture. The scammers never showed their faces. They used unwitting participants as intermediaries. If police traced the couriers, they'd find innocent people who had no connection to the fraud. Chester continued receiving letters confirming each transaction, official-looking documents, government seals, everything designed to reinforce the legitimacy of what was happening.
They were able to get into my computer. They knew everything about me.
Having that information is somewhat mission critical for them to be able to convince someone that they are legitimate.
Until one day, Agent Brown told Chester there was no courier available in his area. He would need to mail $8,500 in cash directly to an address in Huntington Beach, California. Via UPS, Chester did exactly that, and that's when everything unraveled.
And that's when I find out somebody's knocking at my door, and it's the police department from Concord.
So I just had a couple of questions about a package situation that had everybody kind of confused, and hopefully we can get it all sorted out.
Okay.
Chester's story is not isolated. Federal agent impersonation scams are one of the fastest growing fraud schemes in America. Scammers pose as FBI agents, IRS officers, Social Security Administration officials, FTC investigators, any authority figure that triggers fear and compliance. These scams work because they exploit something fundamental. Most people are terrified of being accused of a crime they didn't commit. The idea that you're under investigation, that law enforcement is watching you, that your name is tied to illegal activity, it creates immediate panic. And when you're panicking, you don't verify, you don't pause, you don't call the agency directly. You do what the person on the phone tells you to do. The sophistication of Chester's scam is alarming. The scammers had his complete financial history, 40 years of credit cards. They had access to his computer. They sent official-looking letters with government seals. They used rideshare drivers as couriers, creating a buffer between themselves and the victim. And they made him sign an NDA so he wouldn't talk to anyone who could have told him it was fraud. Concord police emphasized several red flags that everyone should know. First, no legitimate law enforcement agency will ever ask you to send cash, buy gift cards, or transfer money to secure accounts. Government investigations don't work that way. Second, no legitimate investigation requires an NDA preventing you from contacting local police. If someone tells you not to verify their identity with authorities, that's proof they're lying. Third, if someone claims to be from a government agency, hang up and call the agency directly using a number you find yourself, not one the caller provides. Verify independently every time, but even knowing these red flags, victims still fall for these scams. Because the scammers have your data, they know your history, they sound professional, they create urgency and fear that overrides rational thinking. Chester filed a police report. Both Concord and Huntington Beach police departments are involved, but the money is gone. The scammers used methods designed to be irreversible and untraceable. And Chester is left with nothing except a tax bill he can't pay and the possibility of losing his home. Chester Freilich sent nearly $200,000 to people he believed were federal agents. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't careless. He was told he was under investigation for a wire fraud, that his identity had been stolen, that someone was committing crimes in his name. The person on the phone listed every credit card Chester had held in 40 years. They sent official-looking letters from the Department of the Treasury. They sent couriers with passwords to pick up cash and gold from his house. And they made him sign an NDA so he wouldn't talk to anyone who could have told him it was fake. Chester lost everything, his life savings, his retirement, and now he owes $30,000 in taxes he can't pay. The IRS told him if he doesn't pay, they'll take his house.
On top of his loss, Freilich says because he cashed out CDs and an IRA, he anticipates owing more than $30,000 in taxes. The IRS told him if he can't pay it off, they'll put a lien on his house.
It's frustrating for them and it's frustrating for us because it just doesn't seem to stop. It's one problem after another, after another, after another.
The last thing in the world I want to do is be out on the street, Chester said.
The last thing in the world I want to do is be out on the street.
A CVS employee 400 miles away had a bad feeling about two people trying to pick up a package with photos of IDs instead of actual IDs. That employee refused to release the package and called police.
UPS delivered the package to a Huntington Beach CVS, where Concord PD says two people showed up to pick it up with photos of an ID rather than an actual ID.
That one moment of skepticism from a stranger saved Chester from losing even more. But it couldn't save what was already gone. The only protection against scams like this is knowing what they look like before the call comes, before the panic sets in, before you send the first payment. That's what we do here on Love or Lie. I'm Jack. If this story made you want to verify before you trust, if it made you want to share these red flags with someone you care about, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. There's another story coming next week. It's even more elaborate than this one. I'll see you then.